Welcome to NWCF Conversations, an interview series from the Naval War College Foundation, where we talk to everyone from veterans and NWC alumni to industry experts and philanthropists about the issues shaping our lives. Please enjoy the interview. Hi, welcome everybody. My name is Commander Josh Hammond. I'm a military professor at the Naval War College in the Strategy and Policy Department. And today I'm pleased to be speaking with two of the Navy's finest leaders. We have Admiral Bill Hayden and Captain Ron Ravelo, who joined us to talk about their experience in command of the USS Abraham Lincoln, which is a ship I deployed on many years ago as a junior officer as part of Air Wing 2. Brief note of introduction, Admiral Hayden spent over 30 years on active duty as a naval aviator. He has over 4,500 flight hours and 1,000 arrested landings. He was the first commanding officer of the Lincoln when it was commissioned in 1989. Captain Ravelo spent over 25 years in the Navy as an aviator. Flew the SH-3 hotel, SH-360 Foxes and hotels there, and took command of the Lincoln during its midlife refueling and complex overhaul, or RCOH as we call it, phase in 2014, preparing the ship for its next 25 years of service. Gentlemen, welcome and thank you very much for joining us.
Oh, nice to be here.
Thanks for the invite. That's good to be here. Thanks for the invite.
Absolutely. So I guess we'll start at the beginning. Admiral Hayden, do you want to maybe talk a little bit about what it was like to command a newly commissioned aircraft carrier? I imagine it still had that new carrier smell in 1989.
It didn't smell like leather, but yes, it was brand new. In fact, I was not there at the very beginning. It was a long and somewhat circuitous process that got me there. So I arrived about a year before the commissioning. Normally, the pre-commissioning CO will get there 2 years prior. Anyway, I found that whole business, as I'm sure Ron did as well, in the shipyard, is to be strange. It's not something we were trained to do. But the crew was handpicked. The first 500 and then 1,500, then 1,000, then 1,500. They were specially screened to come to the ship. So it was a great bunch of kids and senior officers who, many of whom actually, the senior officers at any rate, had some shipyard experience. So putting the ship together for me was extraordinary. I remember the day that I don't remember what it was called, but they bonged me aboard for the first time. Abraham Lincoln arriving, and I kind of looked around expecting to see this tall guy with a beard. And then I realized it was me, and we were entering a new phase. As I suspect, I could use the entire 30 minutes here talking about it. The reality was that everything we did was for the first time. And if you were to walk yourself through your life, whoever is listening to this, and remember the first car you had, the first date you had, the first kiss you took, I mean, they were all very special. And I, to be honest, I cannot pick out any one in particular as the most special, except for that Abraham Lincoln arriving was a shocking moment for me. And then ordering all the lines to be taken in and getting underway for that first underway period was really extraordinary.
So did you take her through sea trials and all the certifications?
Yes.
Wow.
And Ron did too, I think. Is that right, Ron? You did all that stuff coming out of.
I did the sea trials. Yeah, I was able to do the post-delivery sea trials, certainly.
Yeah.
So everyone's seen the pictures of the ship in that enormous turn. What does that feel like on board?
Well, actually, there's a tendency for you to come to me first. But I'm going to let Ron go first on this one. What was it like for you, Ron? And then I'll kick in.
It was it was a very neat moment. Kind of a little bit of one of those, man, I hope I secured everything in my stateroom moments, though, I have to admit. And I just kind of had to push the I believe button. My CS was down there diligently, holding things up, because if I wasn't able to do anything in my command tour of Abraham Lincoln, I was certainly able to turn that in-port cabin into a fine museum of Abraham Lincoln memorabilia, some of which actually predate even back to your time on board the ship there, Admiral. But it was it was a really exciting moment. In fact, so much so that it's my screensaver on practically everything I've got even today. So
that's great. How we've all been on the ship when the OD gets a little froggy, but I mean that's got to feel just intense as it goes into that turn.
Yeah. I don't know why we do that, other than it is a sea trial event that every ship goes through. Because if you ever did it with airplanes on board, they would probably lose a few over the side.
Absolutely. Now, so Admiral, you said you did the flight deck cert as well?
Yes, but I want to back up just a minute to that rudder reversal, because I was not fully prepared for that. And Ron, I apologize for not cueing you in on it. But the basic process is you go full speed, and then you go hard over on the rudder, and of course the ship heels the other way, and then you do a rudder reversal, and while the ship is heeled over. And I expected it to start to come back. Instead, when the rudder went full over, the ship went another 2 or 3 degrees of heel, and I thought, holy mackerel, it's going over. We're going to. Did that happen to you as well, Ron? It
did. I was really surprised. That the response was not more instantaneous, I think is what you're. But then again, as I started to think about it, this is a 90,000 ton ship. It just doesn't. And then clearly, the fact that the island and the superstructure is on the starboard side, I mean, that has an effect on the turns as well, right? How it favors one side to the other as you're going in and out of them.
So yes, I was sitting in my my commanding officer's chair, and when the ship, it went to about 11 or 12 degrees with the first hard over rudder. And then it went another 3 degrees beyond that when the rudder shifted, and I got out of my chair. I thought, oh, this is not good.
Wow.
So yeah, that's a childhood memory for sure.
So, just for viewers out there, so I think you will probably hear sometimes naval aviators refer to the aircraft carrier as the boat. Technically, what Admiral Hayden just described, how it heels to the outside, not the inside of the turn, is what makes it a ship. But we're probably going to still call it the boat today, if that's okay. So I did have a question, Admiral, on your bio. It said you got over 1,000 traps. I was wondering, any of those were on Lincoln when you were the CO?
Yes, in my day, which is a long time ago, in a not so far away place, I'm in Virginia Beach here, we were allowed to fly off of the ship. And in fact, to your earlier question before I kicked us back to the rudder reversals, I was lucky enough to get the first fleet trap on the ship. To qualify the deck and all of the wires, you have to have Patuxent River and the test pilots come out and do that. But after all of the wires, all but one, the one wire was not certified. So we had to pull that wire for me to make the first fleet trap, which was fine because that meant I wouldn't have one wire. Ron knows what that means. And I brought a little show and tell.
Oh. Oh.
Nice. This is the picture of me making the first fleet trap, and I'm holding the tail hook in my hand that came off of the airplane after I took it back to the beach. I got a 3-wire, Ron, incidentally.
Nicely done, sir.
Oh, that's great. Captain Ravelo, you obviously had some of the same experiences bringing her out of the yards at the end of RCOH. Was anything stood out to you of that experience, either in the yards or kind of bringing her out afterwards?
Yeah, that's a great question. I will tell you, coming in or going into or coming out of an RCOH, or when I assumed command of the ship in RCOH, it neither smelled like new leather nor new steel, for that matter, quite frankly, despite their attempt and their actual efforts to put new steel on board the ship. So it's really interesting. So one of the challenges, and I learned this very immediately. So when a ship goes when we have a new construction, when you start to build out a new construction crew, and I'm pretty sure this was the same back when you had command of Lincoln, Admiral, the Navy has an instruction on how a new construction crew of a ship is going to be manned. There's very exact selection criteria, and there's specific manning numbers about how many, and what kind of evaluation. So you kind of handpick a crew for new construction because it's a big deal. Obviously, it's a big deal. We know that, and you got to kind of do that right. And I knew that instruction existed. The part I did not know is that it doesn't apply to an RCOH ship. So of course I get there. I'm like, hey, where's that instruction that tells me? So now I can call the bureau and say I need a this, and a this. And sorry, boss, that instruction doesn't exist. So that was a little bit of a challenge. But it's what it is. And so really what it caused for me was it really necessitated my being able to get into the heads, if you will, of our crew and really instill to them that and try to instill in them that kind of a new ship type of feel, right? I very much, hey, you're not just in a shipyard to just clean this thing up and modernize. I mean, when the intent here is when this ship goes out for sea trials, I mean, the nation's going to be, they're effectively saying, okay, we've got a new ship back on the line because this has been out of the running. This has been out of the count. It hasn't been on the bench for 5 years almost, right? So here we are, or not 5 years, 3 years, but here we are. We're part of the game now. So don't think that you're just an old ship coming back to life. I mean, this is a significant capability that we're bringing back to our country. We've got to take ownership of that, and it was really tough. That was a challenge when our sailors would show up and they've got shipbuilders there, day in and day out, and I don't mean this to be a slight to the great shipbuilders at Newport News Shipbuilding. I tell you, I used to compliment those, and I still do to this day. I mean, there's the capability that exists in Newport News Shipbuilding is beyond compare. I mean, no other place on this planet can build. I mean, when I was there, it was the Lincoln, we had the Gerald Ford, we had the John F. Kennedy in kind of the early stages of being built, and then at any given time we had 4 Virginia-class nuclear-powered submarines in that shipyard. So great capability, but at the end of the day, I really needed to get to my crew that this isn't their ship. This isn't Newport. This is not a shipbuilder ship. This is a sailor ship. This is your ship, and we need to take ownership of it from day one.
Absolutely. Now, you said you took over in the middle of RCOH. From what I gather, you have an interesting family connection to the previous CO. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah. So my brother-in-law, Admiral Carl Thomas, was actually my predecessor. So he had command. He relieved Admiral Alexander right at the end of their last deployment, and he basically got the ship ready for smart start. Carl, that is, and took the ship into RCOH. And then midway through, I relieved him as the CO, and he split off to go take command of the Carl Vinson, in fact. And then took them on a 10-month deployment. So
that was a big one.
Yeah, it was that was kind of a neat event. kind of turned into a little bit of an argument to see which side of the, where my parents were going to sit, but they're going to sit over there on my brother-in-law's side, or they were going to sit over here on my side. So I won that fight, but we gave them their fair share of family over there.
So you guys were still speaking after change of command. He didn't.
Very, very much so. I mean, he's
that's great.
He's out, of course, doing great things out. He's currently deputy N3, N5, and he's actually on his way out to Pacific Fleet here in a few months. He's going to be going out there to take over as the deputy commander out there.
Oh, wow, that's awesome. One of the missions of the War College is to kind of, obviously prepare, senior leaders for sort of bigger things. Captain Ravelo, you're talking about your brother-in-law and his new role, but for you as, commanding officers of a carrier, what should the war colleges be preparing senior officers for in that kind of day-to-day operational employment, do you think?
I would probably, I think what the War College very much teaches us as officers, naval officers, how to think strategically, right? I mean, we're tactical operators. We're very much, we are raised as tacticians, right? We are at the deck plates and we learn how to fight the wars and operate our machines. I think the value of the War College, and when I went through, what I took away was just, it gives you that opportunity to think at a higher plane that might not necessarily be the natural part of what you do at, say, at the CO of a squadron level or as a department head. And then all of a sudden now you get to this position of leadership. And certainly when you get to the position of leadership of an aircraft carrier, it's not a tactical, you can't approach that with just, with very tactical decision making. You really do have to apply an operational or even a strategic view to everything that you do and the decisions that you make. As I go back to my sailors, I really tried to message with them that, hey, this isn't just a ship. You understand that, right? I mean, there's not very many of them, and what this ship is going to represent. In fact, when you just think about what the Lincoln just did, I used to tell my sailors, and especially the ones that showed up towards the end of our COH, I said, this is your opportunity to learn your equipment and learn how to operate this ship, this warship, this warfare system. And I used to tell them, I go, mark my word, most of you, especially the ones, like I said, that showed up later. And of course, our young enlisted sailors have long, first tours. I said, mark my word, you will one day be on this ship in a very critical part of the world doing something very significant. And of course, what happens, right? Abraham Lincoln just completed the longest operational deployment post-Cold War. And of course, they were in the news. And so I would sit there just, last year as I was watching it, just kind of grinning, just going, I told them that. I told those 3,000 sailors they would be doing exactly what they're doing now.
That's great. I mean, I think sometimes people don't realize it till it happens. I was on board for the tsunami relief effort in 2004 and 2005, mm-hmm. and kind of that same way that you realize only after the fact that you're kind of part of, history almost.
Mm-hmm.
So that's interesting. Admiral, did you have anything that you thought, you'd want a senior leader coming out of the War College to know, or at least to start thinking about?
I'll be honest with you, Josh. I didn't go to the War College, so I was listening intently to Ron's rendition of and I think he, at least from my sideline perspective, I think he hit the nail on the head. We do all come to the jobs that we're talking about here with a tactical perspective and not so much a strategic perspective. I knew because I'd flown off of it and been involved in Vietnam and other events that the carrier was a critical piece. It was essentially not the king, because it can't move very fast, but the queen on the chessboard. And and it was the piece to be protected, and it was the piece that would deliver the knockout blow. Much as Ron stated with his crew, getting them ready to go back to sea, my guys, toward the end, yes, I got some first termers, but by and large, they knew what this ship would have to do. And so I just encouraged them, and they didn't need much encouragement, to put their heart and soul into making it the best daggone machine that the Newport News Shipbuilding had ever built. And I got along well with the shipyard for that reason. I ensured, to the best of my ability at any rate, that the sailors and the shipyard workers were all part of the same team. So sorry I didn't answer your War College question, because Ron did. Great job.
Well, I mean, kind of speaking more generally then, you kind of both talked about some of the memorabilia from Lincoln. I mean, obviously the man's reputation is as a quintessential leader. Did you try to incorporate any of that, either personally or, in your relationship with the ship or the crew? Was it Lincoln focused, or did you just kind of keep that in the background and allow it to inform you?
I anticipated this question a little bit, and I'm embarrassed to say that no, I did not impart to the crew the man, Abraham Lincoln. The reality, I think, and perhaps it's naive of me, but I don't think I needed to. Worldwide, Abraham Lincoln is known. And the man was unique and special in the history of this country. Interestingly, I think 1972 pennies were pretty much out of service by the time Ron took over, because in my day they were 15, 16 years old. But we all wore, our name tags had 1972 pennies on them. The crew would sift through their penny buckets, and we had the kids in Newport News looking through their parents' pockets for 1972 pennies. Interestingly, I grew up in Bethesda, Maryland, outside Washington, D.C., and during my time on Lincoln, I went to the Lincoln Memorial. It just seemed appropriate on one of my trips home. And there was a vendor outside the memorial, and he was selling these pennies that are 1972 pennies. I bought every one he had. There were about 25 of them. It cost me a lot of money, in fact. And I gave these away to all of the big time visitors that came to the ship. So back to your question, Abraham Lincoln was special. My father, unfortunately, passed away before I took command of the Lincoln, but he was a Lincoln aficionado. And if you look over my shoulder here, this is the Carl Sandburg 6-volume Life of Lincoln, the war years, the prairie years. And so I knew, I memorized the Gettysburg Address when I was a kid, because my dad encouraged me to do that. In fact, for the commissioning, when it was my turn to speak, I started with 7 years ago, and you could see the crowd go, "Oh no, he's going to do that." I pulled the speech out of my pocket and said, I wrote my speech on the back of this envelope, and no, I did not. I am embarrassed to say but I don't think I had to.
I remember the ship's motto is "Shall not perish." Who came up with that, and where did that become part of the motto? I guess I'm unaware of the motto process.
That was done by Jack D'Antone, who was my predecessor and actually the first pre-commissioning CO. And he held something of a contest for, at that point, there were only about 500 members of the crew, to come up with a design for the patch and a motto. And so he came up, or they came up with "Shall Not Perish," which I think was good.
Oh, that's great. It always amazed me whenever we do something like that, just the creativity and the talent of our sailors for, drawing or thinking of those things. This is a weird aside. I saw this article talking about that new Top Gun movie that's coming out. They were making a joke about all the customized helmets. Like, oh, are we supposed to believe that they're just people who make these elaborate patterns on their helmets? I was like, yeah, there are people.
There are.
They're called sailors and PRs.
Yep.
I mean, Captain Ravelo, what about you? How did you kind of feel that Lincoln, was part of the ship in that way?
So, I would say I actually went to pretty great lengths, and largely because, in fact, Carla, one of our organizers, was with the Abraham Lincoln Foundation at the time. We had a close relationship with them. We actually, early on in my command tour, we had the opportunity to bring aboard as a guest speaker, Don Phillips, the book Lincoln on Leadership. And of course, and we bought, copies of it. And it was primarily geared towards our E6 and above, our actual leadership on the team, on the ship. And so we really kind of made Abraham Lincoln, a central figure in just kind of our mantra, just kind of the life of getting the ship through, our COH. And in fact, Lincoln, interestingly enough, in my life now as a defense contractor, it's funny even in my own company, how much you take for granted how much is just attributed to Lincoln, how many sayings, there are just so many concepts out there that are attributed to Abraham Lincoln, the great man that he was. And it was I just find it fascinating that, not only did I do it back then when I had command of the Lincoln, maybe that's what sensitized me. I'll be walking around the building and, engage one of our company leaders on, a discussion, and they'll, say, as Abraham Lincoln said, and I'm like, yeah, I'm kind of familiar with a lot of things that Abraham Lincoln said. Believe it or not. Well, that's right. You commanded the Abraham Lincoln. Yep.
I think it's almost like you said. I mean, I think his legacy is so interwoven today. It's almost, even if you don't know anything about, or don't think you know anything about Lincoln, you know a lot. You just don't realize it. So
yeah.
That's actually, so I guess, to kind of pivot a little bit, on what you said, Captain Ravelo, what did you take away from your time as commanding officer that as you transitioned, out of the active duty, what lessons did you feel were most important to, kind of leadership and success?
Yeah. As I reflect back on it, I don't believe that I did, and I certainly now know that I won't, just underestimate the ability of a young sailor. I saw some young Americans on board that ship just doing things day in and day out that, I look at these and I think back on it because I've got young folks now that work for me, again, in my now present life. But, when you look back at what young sailors are doing today, whether it's in a shipyard or on a deployment, they are just really just an amazing group of people, of great Americans. And it was tough to walk away from that. And I think now that I'm obviously very much away from it, it's just awe-inspiring. I miss it quite a bit.
No, that's the part I miss the most right now. That may be flying a little bit.
Yeah, well, that too.
Admiral, what about you? I know you're talking about your work with the schools in Portsmouth. Was that based on an experience you had on the ship, or was that just a personal interest after you retired?
That actually came after I left the ship. But going back to the kids on the ship, as Ron said, just an amazing assortment of different kinds of talent, all woven into the tapestry of a crew that makes the ship work. When we had guests, and I think Ron did too when he went to sea for trials and other times, a lot of important people want to see how a carrier works. So they fly out to the ship and on a cod, and then they'd leave the next day. Well, I didn't leave the bridge, but I had them come up to the bridge, and I handed them all a 3x5 cart. No, it was 5x7, big cart. And I said, okay, you're going to see this ship. You're going to be walked around this ship. I want you to get the name and the home phone number of 5 of my sailors. And if you get the name and home phone number tomorrow morning at breakfast, you show me your card and I'll give you a Lincoln ball cap. And they all looked at me. They all looked at me kind of funny and said, well, okay. And at breakfast the next morning, there would be probably 10 of these folks. And 6 of them would take me for real. And they'd have their 5x7 card with 5 sailors' names and home phone numbers. And I say, okay, now don't throw this away. I want you to go home tomorrow with your ball cap. Here's your ball cap. And I want you to call those parents and tell them that you just saw John or Fred or Sam on the Lincoln. They're doing great and the ship looks terrific. Can you do that for me? And they go, oh yeah. And then the 3 or 4 that didn't get any names kind of felt bad. Okay, here's your ball cap. Get a name from him because he got 5 of them. And I want you to call and say, because they generally stayed together and met the same sailors. The kids, I mean, kind of like us. You ask us a question about what we did or what we do. You ask a kid on a ship what his job is, stand by. You just committed to 15 minutes at least.
Yeah.
I was always nice. A couple times one of my sailors would get Sailor of the Day and go up on the bridge, and sometimes the captain would, use the POTS line to call home and talk to, and of course he always would set it up that the kid was in trouble and he'd have it on speakerphone. So you hear the parent, wait, what? And then he'd, kind of reveal what was happening. So it was always great to, kind of hear the parents just experience how proud the ship was of, their son or daughter. So absolutely.
And at this point I have to interject. While Ron is familiar with all of that technology, this 1989, so this was 40 years ago. 30. This was BC. This was before cell phones. I mean,
pre-POTS line.
We couldn't do that.
Yeah.
Oh no, I'm sorry.
Yeah, exactly. If you were to do that today, they'd just step outside your, the boardroom and just go make the phone call from the catwalk for you.
Oh my God. My first deployment, we had 2 computers in the ready room. One was the SCEDS computer and one was the SDO computer. And I mean, everyone's email was on one of those 2 computers.
Yeah, we were the first ship to go to sea with GPS on board.
Wow.
Yeah, so when we went out for sea trials and came back, we didn't trust it because we never used it. But after we came back, I asked the navigator, I said, so Gator, what'd you think about GPS? I don't like it, he said.
Of course not.
What do you mean I don't like it? He said, well, before we went out, I mean, in the old days, I would have 3 different fixes. I'd have my visual fix in the channel, I'd have my Loran, and I've had my Omni, and I could figure all that stuff out. Now I got GPS, and it gives me a 4th data point, and it just driving me crazy. And I said, so what's the accuracy of the GPS? What's the accuracy of the Loran? What's the accuracy of the Omni? And he had the answers, of course. I said, so which one are you going to believe? Because the GPS was dead on all the time, especially with the visual fixes in the channel. So technology.
I did 2 deployments on Enterprise, and they weren't allowed to use the GPS because it wasn't certified for the ship. So they basically had it up the whole time, but they're sitting there doing it all the old-fashioned way.
Well, we were the same. We were the same. We weren't allowed. It wasn't. We didn't use it as the sole source of our location information.
And your getter wasn't doing celestial navigation still, was he?
No, he did know how, but no.
My dad was a SWO back in the 60s. They said that for celestial, they plot it out, and if you could, if your three plots could be covered up by your cover, that meant it was accurate. Which is, I think that's all the questions we have. Is there anything you guys would like to talk about before we let you go? Appreciate all your time. Thank you for taking the time out today to speak with us.
Happy to do it, Josh. And it's nice to see you again, Ron.
Yes, sir. So good to see you as well. No, it was a pleasure, and thank you for the invitation and the opportunity to boast a little bit about USS Abraham Lincoln. It's a fine ship. I think we all agree.
Absolutely.
Good to be able to talk about her so well.
Shall not perish.
Shall not perish. Shall
not perish. Well, gentlemen, I can't thank you enough for your time, and thanks for sharing some of the challenges and the experiences you had as commanding officers of the Lincoln. I really appreciate it, and we'll see you guys around. Talk later.
Yes, sir.
Have a great day. Be safe.
All right. Goodbye.